The alarm on Dr. Hayes' watch buzzed at 600 hours. He ignored it. The data on his screen was far more interesting than sleep. Numbers scrolled across the monitor in endless streams, each one representing a small victory in the eyes of the station's directors. Had been studying the intelligence markers of the test subjects for 3 months now, and something was wrong. Station orbited Earth at an altitude of 400 kilometers. From this height, the planet looked peaceful. Below that peace knew someone was making very careful plans. Not humanity, someone else. He was a tall man with dark hair turning gray at the temples. His eyes had the tired look of someone who spent too much time staring at screens. He rubbed his face and leaned back in his chair. Around him, station hummed with the sound of machinery and life support systems. This was a research facility, officially. A place where the minds of Earth worked on improving the intelligence of household pets. A place where dogs came in as ordinary animals and left as something different. Dr. Cooper pushed through the lab door without knocking. She was younger than by 10 years, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She held a tablet in one hand and looked worried. "Have you seen the behavioral reports from Level 3? She asked. Nodded slowly. "I have." "Then you know we have a problem." He did know. The problem was that the dogs were not supposed to be as intelligent as they had become. They were not supposed to show emotional preference for individual handlers. They were absolutely not supposed to display what looked like independent thinking. The Vex Collective had arrived 3 years ago with gifts and promises. They came to Earth peacefully, or so the governments had announced. In reality, they came with a plan. The Vex were tall beings with smooth silver skin and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They were masters of genetic engineering. They claimed they wanted to help humanity improve its own biology. What they actually wanted was something smaller and much more useful. Dogs. The Vex had approached the United Nations with an offer. Allow them to establish research facilities on an orbital station. Let them work with Earth scientists on a joint project to improve animal intelligence. In return, they would share genetic modification techniques that could benefit humanity in dozens of ways. The offer had been accepted quickly. Too quickly. No one had asked the right questions. Had started asking questions 6 weeks ago. "The neural development is accelerating beyond projections," said, sitting down across from him. "Test subject 87, the golden retriever, has started using tools. Not just using them. He understood how to modify a problem to fit the solution he already knew." "Did you report this to Director?" asked. "I tried. He said it was within acceptable parameters and reassigned me to work on the behavioral modification protocols." Behavioral modification. That was the real purpose of the program. The Vex did not care about intelligence for its own sake. Intelligence without control was useless to them. They wanted smart dogs that would obey. Dogs that could think but not question. Dogs that would go where they were sent and report what they saw and come home again without complaint. Stood and walked to the window. Station's cupola showed the Earth below, a blue and white marble turning slowly in the black. Somewhere down there, the Vex were preparing to release the first test subjects. The dogs were ready. Coded implants had been surgically placed inside their skulls. Surveillance technology so advanced that it made human cameras look like tin cans with holes poked in them. The dogs would be placed in strategic locations, near government buildings, near military bases, near the homes of important people. They would watch and listen and transmit data back to the Vex. And nobody would suspect a dog. "We need to see what's really happening in the lower levels," said quietly. Made a small noise of protest. "That's a restricted section. Director made it clear that we are only to work on assigned tasks. The lower levels are where the Vex do their real work. The upper levels are for show. They want us here so we can report to our governments that everything is proceeding normally. But normal does not mean what they want it to mean." He turned to face her. "I think the genetic modifications are changing the dogs in ways the Vex did not expect. The intelligence is one thing, but the emotional attachment to handlers, that is something else. The Vex do not understand loyalty. They do not form bonds. To them, everything is transaction and control. They cannot imagine why a dog would prefer to protect a human rather than follow a command." Stood and paced the small room. "If we go down there and we are caught, we lose everything. Our careers, our reputations, possibly our lives." "If we do nothing," said, "then those dogs go to Earth and we become responsible for whatever happens next." That night and made their way through the maintenance tunnels of station. The tunnels were not heavily guarded. The Vex did not believe humans would break rules. They were wrong about that, just as they were wrong about so many other things. The lower levels were warm and loud with the sound of containment fields and life support systems. They found the Vex laboratory through an unmarked door. Inside, 300 dogs lived in individual chambers. Cameras covered every surface. The chambers themselves were spotlessly clean but utterly empty except for the animals and the machines that monitored them, and watched in silence as handlers moved between the chambers. The handlers were human, scientists from Earth who had been recruited into the project and given generous compensation. Some of them looked happy, others just looked tired. One handler was working with a large black German shepherd. The dog's eyes followed the handler with an intensity that seemed wrong. The handler gave a command. The dog moved through a complex series of tasks perfectly, but saw something in the dog's movements. The intelligence was there, the capability, but so was something else, something the Vex had not programmed in. Affection, the dog wanted to please the handler, not because it was commanded to do so, but because it wanted to. "They are going to fail," whispered. "Yes," agreed, "but not in the way the Vex thinks they will fail. The Vex built them to be perfect tools, but tools do not choose to protect. Tools do not prefer loyalty to obedience. The dogs were supposed to be weapons. Instead, the Vex has accidentally created something far more dangerous to their plans." "What is that?" asked. Watch the black shepherd rest its head on the handler's leg, receiving praise and affection in return. "Something that loves," he said. Below them, on the planet's surface, the first of the enhanced dogs was being prepared for release. It would go into the world tomorrow with its implants and its programming and its new mind. It would be placed in a home. It would be given to a human. And when the time came for it to fulfill its purpose, something unexpected would happen. It would hesitate. The dog arrived at the Congressional Research Institute on a Tuesday morning in a delivery crate marked Service Animal Donation. The crate was opened by a junior researcher named Doctor. He was young, just out of graduate school, and excited about working at such a prestigious facility. He had no idea that the animal being handed to him was far more than it seemed. The dog was a golden retriever with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. The delivery driver handed a folder with standard vaccination records and behavioral notes. Everything looked normal. Nothing indicated that this animal had been genetically modified, surgically enhanced, and implanted with technology that would make any government intelligence agency jealous. The dog's name, according to the papers, was Duke. Brought Duke to his office on the 3rd floor of the institute. The office had a window overlooking the city, placed Duke in the corner with a comfortable bed and a water bowl. Duke lay down immediately and watched the activity in the lab with patient interest. "You are a good boy," said, scratching behind Duke's ears. "We are going to be great friends, I think." Duke's tail wagged once, slowly. It was a controlled response, learned behavior. But there was something in the dog's eyes that suggested this response meant more than simple training. Duke was watching as much as was watching Duke. What did not know was that Duke was also watching the layout of the building. The security cameras, the staff movements, the locations of sensitive documents. Every detail was being processed by Duke's enhanced brain and transmitted wirelessly to receivers orbiting above Earth. The implant in Duke's skull worked constantly, gathering intelligence, building maps, understanding the building's defenses. But something else was happening too, something the Vex had not anticipated. Duke was forming a bond with 300 kilometers above on station and were running out of time. Director had assigned them both to new projects, effectively removing them from any position where they could continue their investigation. Had one chance. He had spent the last week copying files from the lower-level laboratory's computer systems. Thousands of documents detailing the Vex's true objectives. The dogs were not just surveillance tools. They were the first wave of a much larger plan. The Vex wanted to map human society from the inside out. They wanted to understand how humans thought, how they organized, where they kept their power structures. The dogs would provide that information. Then the Vex would come with demands: share your technology, acknowledge our authority, submit to our governance. Or face an enemy that lived among you, that you could never fully eliminate. Had the files, he needed someone he could trust to get them to the right people, someone in government who would believe him, someone who would act. He sent a single encrypted message to a contact he had made years ago. a retired military intelligence officer named Colonel Stewart. The message contained nothing but a location and a time. And met Stewart in a parking garage beneath the city. Stewart was a tall man with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. He listened to their story without interruption. When they finished, he stared at them for a long moment. "If this is true," he said slowly, "then we have been compromised at the highest levels." "It is true," said. "We have seen the labs, we have seen the dogs, I have the medical records. The neurological scans show modifications that should not be possible." Stewart took the tablet she offered him and began scrolling through the files. His jaw tightened as he read. "The dogs that are being released, where are they going?" "That is the worst part," said. "They are being distributed to what the Vex have identified as key locations. Government offices, military installations, the homes of political leaders. Over 100 dogs are already in the field. The Vex are releasing more every week." "And the implants? They are transmitting location data." "Yes, confirmed. But the Vex system goes deeper than that. The implants can access any electronic device the dog comes near. The Vex are using them as mobile hacking units. A dog lies at someone's feet while they work at their computer. The implant reads the data, copies files, steals passwords. The dog leaves. The human never suspects anything." Stewart closed the tablet. "You need to get this information to someone in government who can act without going through normal channels. If what you are saying is true, the normal channels are compromised." "That is what we were hoping you could do," said. Stewart stood and walked a few paces away. He turned back to face them. "I have contacts, people I trust, but this is going to cause a war, not with your government, with the Vex. If we move against them, they will respond." "They will respond anyway," said. "At least this way we will have chosen the time and place." Stewart nodded slowly. "Then we move now. Give me everything you have, all of it, every file, every piece of evidence. I will get it to people who can move on it immediately." 3 days later, 6 government agents arrived at station with legal authority to access all research materials. Director was arrested. The Vex scientists were detained for questioning. The lower laboratory was sealed and thoroughly examined. But on Earth, the damage had already been done. The enhanced dogs were in place. They were collecting intelligence. They were building understanding of human defenses. Back at the Congressional Research Institute, continued working as if nothing had changed. Duke continued lying in the corner, watching, learning, transmitting data. But something was happening that no one on either side fully understood yet. Duke was beginning to experience something new. Every time spoke kindly to the dog when he scratched behind Duke's ears, when he brought the animal treats, something changed in the dog's brain. The emotional centers, enhanced along with the intellectual ones, were forming connections with the reward pathways. Duke was learning to value approval above all other directives. On his 5th day at the Institute, a suspicious man entered the building. He carried credentials identifying him as a contractor, but his movements were wrong. Too precise, too calculated. He was working for the Vex. He had come to ensure Duke was functioning properly, to make adjustments if necessary. The man walked towards office. Duke's enhanced senses picked up the Vex scent markers on the man's clothing immediately. A command pulsed through the implant in the dog's skull. An order to follow the man, to confirm his identity with the Vex surveillance network. Duke stood up. But instead of following the man, Duke moved to block the doorway. His body expanded between the stranger and a low growl came from deep in the dog's throat. Looked up from his work, confused. "Duke, what is wrong?" The suspicious man tried to step around the dog. Duke moved closer. The man reached for the dog to push him aside. Duke's teeth came out not in play, but in warning. The man backed away slowly. His hand went to his ear. He was communicating with someone through an implant of his own. "The asset is compromised," he said quietly. "Emotional bonding has primary directives. The experiment has produced unexpected results." He left the building. Did not understand what had just happened. He only knew that his dog had protected him. He knelt down and pulled Duke close. The reports started coming in 3 weeks after Duke refused to follow the Vex operative. At first, they seemed unrelated. A dog in a senator's home had attacked an intruder. Another dog in a military facility had alerted its handler to an unauthorized person in a restricted area. A third dog, living with a Department of Defense analyst, had somehow damaged communications equipment in her office. 12 incidents in 14 days across the continental United States. Colonel Stewart saw the connection immediately. He was sitting in a secure meeting room deep beneath the Pentagon when he realized the truth. The enhanced dogs were not following their programming anymore. They were protecting the humans they lived with instead of spying on them. The Vex made a catastrophic error, Stewart said to the other officials in the room. They engineered loyalty. They created animals with enhanced intelligence and gave them the emotional capacity to care. Then they placed those animals in situations where humans treated them with kindness and affection. The animals chose their humans over their creators. A general named Richard Mitchell leaned forward. "You are saying these dogs have turned against their designers." "I am saying the dogs were never truly loyal to the Vex in the first place," Stewart corrected. "Loyalty is not something that can be programmed into a biological system and remain stable. It has to be earned. The Vex do not understand that. To them, everything is control and command. The dogs learned differently." And now, working directly with Stewart's team, were monitoring every report that came in. They were building a picture of what was happening across the country. The dogs were becoming active defenders rather than passive spies. They were identifying and confronting Vex operatives. They were damaging surveillance equipment. They were systematically working against their creators' plans. But the Vex were not sitting idle. On Earth's orbit, the Vex command vessel hung in space, vast and dark and predatory. Inside the command center, the supreme leader of the Vex delegation stood before a holographic display showing every enhanced dog's location and status. The display was filled with red error messages. The dogs were not responding to commands. The implants were either not functioning or being actively sabotaged by the animals themselves. The supreme leader's name was Commander Vex, though that designation was more functional than personal. The Vex did not think in terms of individual identity the way humans did. To Commander Vex, the enhanced dogs were simply tools that had broken. Tools could be repaired or replaced. "Send the deactivation sequence," the commander ordered. The command went out through every implant at once. A neural pulse designed to shut down the dog's enhanced cognition and return them to their baseline intelligence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the dogs began to remove their implants. They clawed at their own skulls, tore at their own flesh, and worked methodically to extract the devices that controlled them. Duke, living with Colonel Stewart in suburban Virginia, spent 4 hours systematically exposing the surgical site where his implant had been placed. It hurt. The pain was real and significant, but he understood something that the Vex had never grasped. Freedom was worth pain. When Stewart found Duke bleeding and injured, the old soldier did not panic. He rushed the dog to the best veterinary surgeon he could find and paid whatever cost was necessary to save the dog's life. As Duke recovered, Stewart realized something had changed in the animal's eyes. The implant was gone, but Duke's intelligence remained. The genetic modifications were permanent. The Vex could remove the technology, but they could not remove the enhancements they had made to the dog's brain. "Duke is choosing to stay with you," said when she visited Stewart's home. "The implant is gone. The Vex control is gone. He could leave if he wanted to." "But he is choosing not to," Stewart finished. "He is choosing to stay because he trusts me." Duke rested his head on the colonel's lap and closed his eyes. The old man's hand moved slowly across the dog's back, finding comfort in the simple act of touching a living thing that had chosen to be near him. Across the country, a similar scene was playing out in 12 other homes and facilities. Enhanced dogs, now free of Vex control, were staying with the humans they had bonded with. They were partners now, not tools, and they were far more valuable to humanity than they could ever be to the Vex. The Vex took the next logical step. They sent assault teams to Earth. The teams arrived in small shuttle craft that descended through the atmosphere under cover of a false atmospheric anomaly reading. Vex soldiers, sleek and dangerous, deployed to the 12 locations where the freed dogs were known to be. Their objective was simple: eliminate the dogs and retrieve any surviving implants or genetic material. What they did not count on was that Duke and the other enhanced dogs were no longer alone, and had briefed law enforcement and military personnel on what was happening. When the Vex assault teams arrived, they found themselves facing armed humans who knew the dogs' locations. The first firefight took place in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., outside Colonel Stewart's home. Vex soldiers moved through the residential neighborhood with precision and speed. Duke watched from inside Stewart's house, his enhanced mind processing the threat assessment instantly. The dog did not wait for a command. Duke moved to the door, waited for Stewart to open it, and ran directly at the approaching Vex soldiers. The enhanced dog was fast, faster than normal animals could be. The Vex soldiers tried to use their weapons, but Duke's intelligence allowed him to predict their movements. He dodged and wove through their defensive fire, getting close enough to bring one soldier down. The soldier's weapon fell to the ground, and Duke seized it in his teeth. Stewart and the military units that had been waiting in position opened fire. Within minutes, the assault team was neutralized. Similar scenes played out across the country. The enhanced dogs, working alongside human military and law enforcement, repelled the Vex assault teams. Not all the dogs survived. 3 were killed in the fighting. Another was so severely wounded that the veterinarians could not save it. But the Vex assault failed completely. They had underestimated the combination of human tactical skill and animal intelligence. The Vex command vessel responded by attempting to destroy station. An energy beam, focused from the massive ship above, tore through the orbital station's hull. The facility, home to 300 human scientists and researchers, began to decompress. It was a statement of Vex rage and superiority. The facility was abandoned. The humans would have to die. But it had already evacuated. They had anticipated a Vex response. All the critical data from the lower laboratories was secure to multiple locations on Earth. The Vex had destroyed a facility, but they had not destroyed the knowledge that facility contained. In the rubble of station, survivors were rescued by human rescue craft. The Vex retreated, but not far. They remained in orbit, and they remained a threat. Commander Vex stood in silence, watching the displays before him. For the first time in Vex history, an inferior species had defeated a Vex military operation. The superior technology had failed. The superior genetics had been overcome. The Vex had been humiliated by creatures they had considered barely capable of speech. "Begin preparations for planetary withdrawal," the commander finally said. "The humans are not ready to be dominated. They should not be ready, but they are. And until we can understand why, we cannot risk further confrontation." What the Vex commander did not understand was that humanity's greatest strength had never been technology or genetics. It was the capacity to care for others, to form bonds that transcended logic, to stand with companions even when fear demanded retreat. The Vex had tried to engineer superiority. What they had inadvertently created was a partnership, and partnerships, in the end, were stronger than any tool ever manufactured. 6 months after the failed Vex assault, the United Nations established the Canine Defense Initiative. Officially, it was a research program. In reality, it was the world's first military organization designed to integrate an alien genetic creation with human soldiers. Colonel Stewart was named the head of the initiative, a role he accepted with the understanding that he would be working directly with the enhanced dogs. Duke became the symbol of the program, the dog that had stood against impossible odds and emerged victorious. Photographers took pictures of Duke standing next to Colonel Stewart at the UN headquarters. Those images were broadcast around the world. Humans finally understood what the enhanced dogs represented. They were not weapons. They were not tools. They were partners. But the Vex were not finished. The command vessel still orbited Earth, waiting, watching. Commander Vex had sent new orders from the Vex home world. Earth had proven more difficult to subdue than anticipated. A different approach was needed, one that did not rely on direct military confrontation, but on psychological and political pressure. The Vex began making formal demands to Earth's governments. First demand: surrender all enhanced dogs for study and retrieval. Second demand: provide genetic samples from the human population for analysis. Third demand: acknowledge Vex authority over all future development of genetic technology. Fourth demand: agree to Vex oversight of human military development. If these demands were not met within 30 days, the Vex threatened to destroy all major population centers. The threat was credible. The Vex had the technology to do it. They had proven that in their assault on station. World governments convened in emergency session. The mood was bleak. Some nations were ready to surrender immediately. Others wanted to mount a resistance. A few suggested negotiation. It was Hayes, now working as a senior science advisor, who offered a different perspective. "The Vex have a weakness," he said to the assembled world leaders. It is the same weakness that caused them to fail with the dogs. They assume that intelligence and loyalty can be separated from emotion. They believe that if they can simply take the dogs and remove them from their human partners, the dogs will revert to their baseline intelligence. But that is not how biology works. The bonds the dogs have formed are not programming. They are genuine connections. The enhanced dogs will not cooperate with the Vex any more than humans will. Your point, asked the Secretary General. My point is that the Vex do not understand what they are facing, continued. They do not understand that humans and the enhanced dogs have formed a true alliance. To the Vex, all relationships are transactional. There is dominance and submission. There is use and usefulness, but there is no actual partnership in their psychology. They cannot imagine choosing to stand with another being unless there is something to gain. When the enhanced dogs chose to stay with their humans, when they chose to fight against their creators, the Vex believed it was malfunction. But it was the most natural response imaginable to any intelligent creature that has been treated with kindness. Stood next. We have analyzed the Vex vessel. It is formidable, but it is not invulnerable. The Vex are relying on the assumption that we will either surrender or attempt direct military confrontation. We cannot win a direct conflict. Our weapons are inferior, but we do not have to fight that way. We have something the Vex have never faced. We have the dogs. And more than that, we have unified human will. The Vex expect division and chaos among humans. We can give them unity instead. Colonel Stewart stepped to the podium. We have a military advantage that the Vex cannot counter. The enhanced dogs can think independently. They can make decisions in the field without waiting for orders. They can anticipate threats in ways that purely programmed systems cannot. We integrate them with human soldiers, and we create a force that is greater than the sum of its parts. The Vex created them as spies. We will use them as warriors. And we will win because we understand something the Vex do not. We understand how to work together. The vote was unanimous. Earth would not surrender. For the next 20 days, preparations began. The enhanced dogs underwent intensive training with human military units. Duke trained with a special forces team under Stewart's personal command. The other freed dogs were paired with soldiers and officers around the world. New dogs, born to the original enhanced dogs, showed similar cognitive abilities. Nature had given humanity a gift, and humanity was going to use it. The Vex command vessel remained stationary, unmoving, as if waiting to see if the humans would change their minds. On the 28th day, the vessel finally moved. It descended lower into Earth's orbit, positioning itself directly above the Pacific Ocean. The Vex had clearly chosen their target city, Los Angeles, a population center of 4 million humans. An energy beam charged. The destruction was minutes away. At that exact moment, 300 kilometers above the Earth, a human space shuttle docked with a destroyed section of station. The shuttle had been modified. Inside were the most advanced weapons humanity could build, and they had been designed specifically to damage Vex technology. Stewart led the team personally. With him were 6 of the most intelligent enhanced dogs, including Duke. The team breached the Vex vessel from an unexpected angle. Vex security sensors did not register the intrusion until it was too late. The dogs moved faster than Vex soldiers could react. Their enhanced cognition allowed them to process multiple threats simultaneously. Duke, moving through the vessel with cold precision, identified critical power systems. The team planted charges. Commander Vex realized too late what was happening. As the first explosions tore through the power core, the commander attempted to flee, but Stewart was waiting in the corridor. Their confrontation was brief and decisive. The commander fell. The vessel began to fail. Stewart and his team, along with the enhanced dogs, evacuated with minutes to spare. The Vex command vessel, disabled and burning, began its descent into the Pacific Ocean. It impacted with force equivalent to a large meteor strike, but the unpopulated ocean absorbed the worst of the impact. The Vex had been defeated, not by superior weapons or advanced technology, but by something much simpler: the ability to work together, the willingness to stand with partners, the understanding that true strength came not from dominance but from cooperation. The remaining Vex on Earth were captured or fled. The threat that had seemed overwhelming just weeks earlier was suddenly gone. Humanity had not just survived the encounter, it had triumphed, and the enhanced dogs had played a crucial role in that victory. The sanctuary for enhanced dogs was built on 300 acres of forest in Northern California. It was called Haven, and it represented humanity's first serious attempt to create a truly ethical relationship with another intelligent species. Hayes stood at the main observation platform, watching as dogs moved through the forest. Some were alone, exploring at their own pace. Others were in groups, communicating in ways that humans were still learning to understand. 1 year had passed since the Vex vessel fell into the Pacific. The world had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Governments had fallen, new ones had risen. Society had restructured itself around the reality of coexisting with intelligent dogs. It had not been easy, and it was far from finished. Cooper approached, holding a tablet with the latest reports. "You should see this," she said. The data showed something remarkable. The enhanced dogs were developing a form of sign language, not one taught to them, but one they had created themselves. They were modifying human gestures into meanings that conveyed complex thoughts. More than that, they were teaching these gestures to other enhanced dogs. Communication was becoming standardized. Language was emerging naturally from the population. "They are developing culture," said quietly. "Yes," agreed. "They are, and they are doing it faster than humans developed language. Their enhanced cognition allows them to process patterns and create systems of meaning with remarkable speed." Across the continent, in Washington, D.C., Colonel Stewart sat in his office at the Pentagon. He was now the official ambassador to the enhanced dog species. The title had seemed absurd when it was first created. Now, it was one of the most important positions in the government. Stewart worked every day to establish protocols for interaction, to create rights and protections for the enhanced dogs, to ensure that humans and dogs could coexist in mutual respect. Duke lived with Stewart. The dog was not just a companion now, he was an advisor. When Stewart held meetings about dog-human relations, Duke attended. The dog could not speak human language, but his presence influenced decisions. It reminded humans that they were not just making policy. They were making decisions about real individuals with their own needs and desires. "I think we should establish an education center," Duke's handler said during one such meeting. The handler was reading from notes based on Duke's own suggestions, communicated through sign language. "A place where both humans and dogs can learn from each other. Humans teaching dogs about human culture, dogs teaching humans about enhanced cognition." Stewart nodded. "Draft the proposal, present it to the International Council." On the sanctuary grounds in California, new puppies were being born to enhanced parent dogs. These second-generation animals showed even greater cognitive development than their parents. They developed language faster. They understood complex concepts more intuitively. The genetic enhancements were breeding true. Within a few generations, the enhanced dogs would represent a fully developed intelligent species, distinct from humans but equal in capability. A senior researcher named Dr. James Collins was studying one of these new puppies. The animal was no more than 3 months old, but it demonstrated problem-solving abilities that exceeded most adult dogs. The puppy was attempting to open a puzzle box containing treats, not by trial and error, but by understanding the mechanical principles of the lock. "What are you?" Collins asked the puppy gently. "You are beyond anything I have words for." The puppy looked up at Collins with eyes that held genuine intelligence, then returned to solving the puzzle. The dog understood the question. The puppy simply had no interest in answering it in human terms. Back at station, humans were rebuilding the facility. But this time, it was designed differently. It would serve as a joint research center where humans and enhanced dogs could work together on scientific problems. The first projects were already being discussed. Joint human-dog teams to study the genetics of the enhancements. Collaborative work on medical treatments using the unique abilities of the enhanced dogs. The Vex, it seemed, had unintentionally given humanity a gift. They had tried to create weapons and had instead created partners. They had attempted to engineer superior servants and had produced equals. The irony was not lost on anyone. 5 years after the defeat of the Vex command vessel, the United Nations officially recognized the enhanced dogs as a sapient species. They were no longer classified as animals. They had legal rights. They could own property. They could vote on matters that affected them. Some conservative groups protested. Some religious organizations raised objections. But the reality was undeniable. The enhanced dogs were people. They were different people with different abilities and different ways of thinking. But they were people nonetheless. Duke was present at the United Nations when the formal declaration was made. Colonel Stewart stood beside him. They were no longer officer and subordinate. They were partners and friends. The friendship had started when Duke was property, when the dog was supposed to be a tool. It had deepened through conflict and cooperation. It had matured into something that transcended species. When the vote passed, Duke placed his paw on Stuart's arm. The gesture meant many things: gratitude, acceptance, recognition of a bond that would last until both of them were gone. At the sanctuary in California and watched footage of the vote. They had been given the highest humanitarian awards for their role in preventing the Vex conquest of Earth. They had refused most of the accolades. They were scientists. They had simply observed, reported, and acted based on evidence. The real heroes were the enhanced dogs, they always said. The dogs that had chosen loyalty over programming. The dogs that had chosen to protect humans instead of spy on them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had just let things proceed normally?" asked. "If we had never investigated the lower levels?" "Every day," admitted. "And I think the same thing every time. We would have failed. Without knowing the full truth, humanity would have faced the Vex ultimatum unprepared. We would have lost, but the dogs would not have. The Vex still would have tried to use them. The dogs would still have refused. Eventually, the same outcome would have occurred, but it would have taken longer. More humans would have died. The Vex might have destroyed entire cities before they were defeated." "So our investigation saved lives," said. "Our investigation accelerated the inevitable," corrected. "The Vex failed because they did not understand something fundamental about biological systems. Intelligence without emotion is incomplete. Programming cannot account for the emergence of genuine loyalty. When you create an intelligent animal and give it the capacity to care, you create something that will always eventually choose care over programming. The Vex could have engineered superior servants. Instead, they created beings capable of love, and love is always stronger than control." 20 years after the Vex defeat, the world had fully integrated the enhanced dogs into society. Mixed schools existed where human and enhanced dog children learned together. Teams of humans and dogs worked in every field of science, medicine, business, and government. There was prejudice still. There would always be those who feared what they did not understand. But the overall trajectory was clear. Two intelligent species were learning to share a world. The children of that time, both human and dog, grew up with the idea that intelligence could take different forms, that strength could come in different packages, that loyalty and love were more powerful than any weapon. The lessons of the Vex failure were taught in schools. The moment when an alien species had tried to engineer intelligence but had forgotten about consciousness was studied in every classroom. On his deathbed, Colonel Stuart received a visit from Duke. The dog was old now, graying around the muzzle, moving slowly with the aches of age. Duke lay beside the old soldier and rested his head on the bed. They did not need words. They never had. The bond they had formed in conflict, strengthened through cooperation, had become the deepest relationship either of them had ever known. Stuart's hand rested on Duke's head, stroking gently. "Thank you," he whispered, "for choosing to stay with me, for proving that there could be something better than war." Duke's tail moved once slowly, and in that moment all the struggles and victories of the past 2 decades seemed to crystallize into a single truth. The Vex had been right about one thing. The enhanced dogs were far more intelligent than baseline animals, but they had been wrong about everything else. They had believed that intelligence should lead to domination. They had believed that superiority meant control. They had believed that emotions were a weakness to be engineered out of any useful creation. But the enhanced dogs had proven something different. They had proven that intelligence combined with emotion created something far greater than intelligence alone. They had proven that the capacity to love was not weakness but strength. They had proven that partnership was more powerful than superiority. And in that proof, they had saved not just humanity but themselves. Not from destruction, but from the terrible fate the Vex had planned for them. The Vex had tried to bioengineer the dogs. In doing so, they had accidentally created the ones. The enhanced dogs looked at humans differently now. They saw them not as masters or inferiors, but as friends. Different but equal. And humans, watching their new partners work beside them, finally understood what the Vex had failed to grasp. The dogs were not the ones without emotion. They were the ones who could think deeply and feel truly and choose to stand beside you in the darkness. That was intelligence, that was wisdom, and that was what would carry both species into whatever future awaited them. But as Stuart returned to Earth and saw images of the Vex vessel burning in the ocean, he realized something important. The war had been won, but the real challenge was just beginning. What would humanity do now with the enhanced dogs? How would society change when there were intelligent animals that could think and communicate and make decisions? What did it mean to be human when humans were no longer the only intelligent species on the planet? Those were questions for tomorrow. Today, Duke rested his head on Stuart's shoulder, and the old colonel allowed himself to smile. The dogs had proven themselves. Now humanity would have to learn to see them as something other than pets. The future was uncertain, but it would be faced together. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I do not know what that was, but thank you." Duke rested his head on shoulder, and somewhere in the enhanced dog's modified brain, loyalty finally overrode programming. The Vex had made a terrible mistake. They had created animals intelligent enough to understand what they were being asked to do. They had given those animals emotional capacity, and then they had given them humans they cared about to protect. The failure had begun, and it was going to spread across the entire planet like a virus the Vex could never contain. And in that hesitation would be the seeds of the Vex Collective's first true defeat.